Hi everyone, Patricis Juwanano here with Research Method. Now our topic today is data analysis. Okay, so here is the screen. So we are going to talk about various kinds of data analysis here. Sorry. Yeah. So again, this material refers to my book, Chapter 4, especially coding. Let me remind you of the overall thesis chapters that you are going to write later. Chapter 1 is Introduction, Chapter 2 Review of Related Literature, Chapter 3 Method, and Data Collection, Data Analysis, and Findings. Today we are going to talk about this part. So in data analysis, when you analyze the data in a qualitative research, this means breaking down the data into its parts. So you have a data, then you break it down so that you get its parts. And then your task is to determine how those parts are related to each other to form patterns. And the patterns can be used to answer your research problem or to attain your research objective. Yeah. Now in quantitative data, if you are doing a quantitative research, that means trying to determine the kinds of relationship between the variables. For example, is there a causal relationship? You are trying to determine if there is a cause and effect relationship in your data. Or is there a correlation? You want to determine if there is a correlation between the variables that you are investigating. Or is there a difference? Yeah, there is a statistical analysis called t-test and ANOVA, which can detect the difference between sets of data. Okay, so that's data analysis in qualitative research, in quantitative research. Okay. Now, a simple analysis is called descriptive statistics. This actually, you provide the description of the mean or the average, the median. In Indonesian language, it is called nilai tengah. So if you put your data, order it from the lowest to the highest, then you get a score in the middle. That's called the median. Okay, and the mode. The mode are values or scores that occur most frequently in your set of data. So if you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 5, 6, 7, then the mode in that data is 5 because 5 occurs most frequently in that data. Okay, you can use Microsoft Excel to find out the descriptive statistics of a set of data. So it's quite easy. There are some statistical analysis, parametric and non-parametric. We are going to talk about this later. But here, if you are dealing with correlation, then you have a Pearson's product moment for the parametric. This is the kind of statistical analysis that you will need if you run a correlation study. In non-parametric, you will use a Spearman's correlation or chi-square. When you want to test the difference between scores, then you have a t-test or ANOVA or ANCOVA. In non-parametric, you use what is called Mann-Whitney U-test. Mann-Whitney U-test. Okay, just to give you a brief description of what you will need, what statistical analysis you will need if you deal with numbers. Yeah. Now, if you don't deal with numbers, if you deal with type script of interview or utterances or sentences, then your data analysis will be coding. Coding from the word code. Yeah. You basically code the data so that you will find the patterns there. Okay, so this involves marking some keywords in a transcript of an interview and then building the categories from them. So all you need to do is to mark your transcript with highlighter or with boldface or with italic or whatever. You do that to some keywords, some important keywords in your transcript, and in such a way so that you can eventually find the pattern. You can eventually classify them into some categories, and then you relate all the categories until you find a pattern that will answer your research objective. Okay? Yeah. Now, coding consists of two. Open coding is you simply mark some important keywords. And then it is followed by actual coding. Actual coding here, you determine the relations between the keywords. And from there, you determine some patterns that answer your research objectives. So basically, coding consists of open coding and actual coding. Okay. Now, let me give you an example of coding. So, suppose this is a transcript from an interview that you do with a student, and the student says this: saya hanya belajar kalau besoknya ada ujian saja, etc., etc. You know that I have marked the transcript. I have put the red highlighting here to mark the key concepts. So these are the key concepts or the keywords of this transcript. These are the words that I consider important in the data. Yeah. So you have several phrases being marked with red here. Yeah. Besoknya ada ujian, kalau belajar jauh hari percuma, etc., etc. Yeah. And then after this open coding, you proceed to actual coding. In actual coding, again, you determine the relationship between the keywords that you have coded in the open coding. So, for example, belajar jauh hari causes lupa. So there is a cause and effect relationship between the two codes. Belajar jauh hari causes lupa. Main, playing games, causes pikiran segar, bisa konsentrasi. Again, you establish a causal relationship between the two codes here. And then you have diperiksa orang tua, causes pretend to study, etc., etc. Yeah. And then you can also code belajar tidak terlalu lama. This is the duration of the act of studying. Kalau besoknya ada ujian saja, you can decide that it is the timing of the studying. So in actual coding, basically, you try to find relationship between the open codes that you have determined in the open coding. You try to determine the relations. You try to look at the larger pattern. You try to establish a category. And that's what you do in axial coding. Okay. Another important step in analyzing your data is triangulation. Triangulation is the act of having another trained person to look at your data and then to code or classify the same data into its categories. Yeah. So ideally, you and this second rater agree on the coding. You have to agree, both of you have to agree how to classify the data, what data are to code, how to establish the relations between the codes, and what is the result of the determining the relationship. Basically, you have to agree. If you can reach a high agreement, then it is called you have achieved a high inter-rater reliability. And that is something good in your data analysis. If there is no such triangulation, maybe because you run out of time and you cannot find a person who is kind enough to support your data analysis or to serve as a second rater, then your coding is actually weak. Your interpretation is very subjective. It is only based on your subjective opinion, and it is not good. It's okay to do that, or it's okay if that happens, but you have to admit that in the limitation of the study that you put in chapter 1. Okay. Important note, so when writing your findings, refer back to your research problems or research objectives. Make sure your findings answer them accurately. So for example, you can write this section presents the answer to the first research objective, and then you put again you rewrite your research objective from your chapter 1 here, so that you won't forget that you have to answer this. Yeah? When discussing your findings, always try to relate the theories and the previous studies in chapter 2 to your findings. Don't just present your findings and then you leave them. But you have to discuss your findings and then you relate them to the theories and the previous studies that you have reviewed in chapter 2 of your thesis. Okay? Sounds good, right? Okay, that's it. Students, good luck for your research project and goodbye for now.